Well, howdy there, 3C. Are you ready for another video? We are finding angles with the primary trig ratios today. Last class we solved, or last lesson I should say, we solved for sides. Now we're going to find angles. So let's look at our topic. Using primary trig ratios to find angles. And our goal, I can find any triangle in a right triangle. Now that's very important. That is so important. So important. That I am actually going to highlight it. Any angle in a right triangle. We have to have that right angle, otherwise we don't know where the hypotenuse is. So you must have that right angle in there. So always look for the right angle before you use Sohcahtoa. So using the primary trig ratios, as long as I have at least two sides. Now we can't find an angle unless you got two sides given. If you've only got one side, you're out of luck. So let's take a look. First of all, I say, remember Sohcahtoa. That's pretty important too. I'm going to highlight Sohcahtoa. You don't have to, but I'm going to. Example 1, use your calculators to solve for the angle. So in here, we don't know what the angle is. The angle is marked A. I want to know what value that is. I want to know what I can plug into the calculator, sine of what number, to get 0.5673. Well, let's have a look. Is it the sine of 20? No, that's 0.3. What about the sine of 30? Oh, that's 0.5. I'm getting closer. What about the sine of 40? There's got to be an easier way. I can't, no, that's way too big. There's got to be an easier way. And in fact, there is. There's no sine A button. You can't actually use sine A. You have to get the calculator to tell you what A is. So what we actually have on the calculator is an inverse sine button. And I'm going to highlight that too. I'm just going wild with the highlighter in this video. Okay, so we have an inverse sine button. I'm going to show you where that is. See this nice little picture of my calculator? This is a fancy dancy calculator. This is a good one. Okay, our little sine inverse is right here. Do you see it? I just highlighted it in green. It says sine to the -1 and it appears above the sine button. So anytime that you want to get some function that's above a button, you got to press this key, the shift key first. So here's how you're going to type it in. And what you're doing here is you're saying to the calculator, hey man, I know that when I divide the opposite by the adjacent, because that's sine, right? Opposite divided by, by adjacent? No, that's not sine. Ooh, that's a big boo-boo. What is that? Sine is opposite divided by, yell it out loud and clear, opposite over hypotenuse. That's right, boys and girls. Opposite over hypotenuse. So you're saying to the calculator, hey, Mr. Calculator man, I know when I divide the opposite by the hypotenuse, like sine tells me, that I get 0.5673. What I want to know is what the angle is that's in that triangle. So I'm just going to draw a rough sketch. Here's what we're dealing with. I've got some angle down in here, A, and I know that if I take this side over here, I'm just going to put a little swoopy doopy here. If I take this side over here, that's the opposite, and I divide it by this side over here, I get this number. So the calculator is going to give it to me. So here's how I plug it into the calculator. I say A is going to equal the inverse sine, which is sine -1, of 0.5673. And that's the way I'm going to type it in. Now, that's the way a calculator that looks like this would use it. That you would actually press shift and then the sine button and then type this thing in and hit equals. The calculator that's on my computer is much the same as what you would find on your iPads or iPods. We have to do it backwards. So I'm going to clear what's on here, and then I'm going to type in 0.5673. And now instead of pressing just sine, I would press sine if I knew what the angle was. But since I don't know the angle, since I'm finding the angle, I have to press shift. Now on here, the shift looks like this little up arrow. And then I'm going to press sine. See how it turned into sine the -1 on this calculator? So that tells me that it's 34.6 approximately. So 34.6, and we measure angles in degrees. Now down here we've got tan. Now tan is opposite over adjacent. That must have been what I was thinking of when I typed this thing up here. Tan is opposite over adjacent. And so I know that when I divide the opposite side by the adjacent side, I'm going to get this number. Is that the same number I used? Yes, I used the same one. Oh well. Now I'm going to go tan -1 of 0.5673. Now let's type that into the calculator. 0.5673, and now I have to press, oh, I don't have to press shift, it's still on my calculator. See how it still says -1? And now I just press tan. So it's 29.6. 29.6. Now, what that actually means, I'm going to pull the calculator back up, is if I type in that angle, that 29.6, and I hit the tan button, I should get this back. Now, it might not be that exactly because we've been doing a lot of rounding with this, but it should be close to that. So I'm going to press tan, just regular tan, so tan, and 0.5681. So that's close to that. The reason it's not exact is because we rounded this number. Okay, so now how do we do it if we're actually given an angle? So solve for the indicated angle in the given diagrams. Here I've got this step by step, and this is very similar to what we were doing in the last lesson. We're going to circle the angle we're finding. Remember in the last lesson we circled the angle we were going to use. Now we're still using that angle, but we're finding it. So we're going to circle the angle we're finding. Label each side with an O, an A, or an H, depending on its relationship to the angle. Pick two sides with numbers given for the lengths, and decide which trig ratio to use those sides that uses those sides in Sohcahtoa. Set up the appropriate ratio and solve accordingly. Remember, when finding an angle, I'm going to highlight that too. When finding an angle, you will have to press shift before the ratio button, and by the ratio button I mean sine, cos, or tan. Alright, now let's go down here. We've got part A, B, and C, and then that's it. We got 3 things we're going to find. So let's follow these steps. I'm going to pull this down so you can still see the steps. First step says circle the angle you're finding, and now I'm going to make step 1 disappear because that's a pretty easy step. So let me get a pen down here instead of my highlighter, and I'm going to circle the angle I'm finding, and then I'm going to label the sides O, A, and H. Okay. We're going to do H first because that one's the easy one, right? Across from the right angle. Opposite goes directly across from theta, so that's opposite. And then obviously the one that's left over is A. So here's what we're going to do. We pick the 2 sides that have numbers on it. Well, that's easy, and I'm going to use my highlighter just because I really like using the highlighter right now. Let's use yellow highlighter. Here's the 2 sides that have numbers. And they are the O side and the A side from this angle. So here's how we're going to write this down. We're going to write down that theta because I always start by writing down the angle. And now I have to figure out what uses O and A. Well, O and A, let's look up here at Sohcahtoa. O and A is tan. So I'm going to write tan in front. And tan is O over A. That's what this thing means. That's O over A. So from theta, O is 14 and A is 6. So we go 14 over 6. Now remember, when we're finding, I have to use the shift tan, but I'm going to find out what 14 divided by 6 is first. So that we have 14 divided by 6. So that we have this number 2.3333, and I'm going to put it to 4 decimal places, 3333, and that's the tan of theta. Now remember, to get theta, and this is the same as when we got A in the last example, we're going to go tan to the -1 of 2.3333. And we're going to type that into the calculator. I'm going to pull this up again, and I've got all those digits on there, so I don't even have to get any really round off errors. I just have to do tan to the -1. Now I just have the tan button here, so I got to press shift first. And now it turns into tan to the -1, so I press it. So 66.8. 66.8. And of course this is an angle, so that's measured in degrees. Now let's go over here. We're going to do this again. I'm going to maybe go a little quicker. Circle the angle you're using. Label the sides. So this side over here is the hypotenuse. This side over here directly across is the opposite, and this side is the adjacent. Now if I'm going to take my highlighter, I'm going to pick the two sides that have numbers on it, and that just happens to be the A and the H. Now the A and the H, if we take a look back, I'm going to rewrite Sohcahtoa right here. Sohcahtoa. And look, A and H goes with cos. So I'm going to write down cos with the angle, because cos always needs an angle, so does sine and so does tan. Cos theta equals, now that's A over H. So A is 15 over H is 22.3. Now let's figure out what 15 divided by 22.3 is. 15 divided by 22.3 is 0.6726. 0.6726. Always leave 4 decimal places so that you don't get too much of a round off error. And how do you get theta away from the cos? How do you figure out the angle? You have to press shift cos, which turns into cos -1, 0.6726. Let's pull that up. Here it comes. Oh, it's already there. 6726. It's still on my calculator. Good job I didn't press clear. Now I'm going to press cos -1, and this already has the shift pressed on it. So when I press the shift, I get the cos -1. You'll have to press shift on your calculator. Cos -1, 47.7. 47.7. Now, if you're having trouble with your calculator, you need to talk to me in class about how to use that calculator, because the calculators are all a little bit different. Now, going back over here, this one, we've got three sides all with numbers on it. Isn't that interesting? I'm going to circle the angle I'm trying to find. I'm going to label all my sides. So across from the right angle is the hypotenuse. Across from the angle I'm using is the opposite. And the leftover one that touches the angle that's right next to the angle is A. Now it said we have to use 2 sides that have numbers on it. Well, all 3 of them. So I actually have a choice here. I can use any of those 3 primary trig ratios and I will get the same answer. It does not matter which one you pick. You could pick one that's different than the person beside you. You're both going to get the right answer. So since this one used tan and this one used cos, I'm going to choose to use sine. And sine, let's look up at that Sohcahtoa. Sine up here is opposite and hypotenuse. So I want to use the opposite side and the hypotenuse so that I use sine. So here I'm going to write this down. I'm going to write sine first, and then sine, cos, and tan always need an angle. Whether it's the angle we're finding or the angle we're using, it's got to go with it. It has no meaning without it. So sine of theta equals opposite over hypotenuse. Our opposite is 15 and our hypotenuse is 25. Now, what is 15 divided by 25? 15 divided by 25 is 0.6. 0.6. That's what sine theta is. And now, to find the angle, we have to do the inverse sine. We have to say, hey, Mr. Calculator Man, I know that when I divide the opposite side by the hypotenuse, I get 0.6. Can you tell me what that angle is over there? And the calculator says, sure, I can. As long as you press sine -1, I'll tell you. So 0.6 and press the sine -1, we get 36.9 approximately. Sine -1 of 0.6 is 36.9 degrees. And that concludes this video.